British Manufacturing Podcast, brought to you by MTD, MFG and Jefferson.
Hello and welcome to the second episode of the new series of the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. We've got some potentially fantastic news for the UK, but we will leave that for our special guest to explain more, Mauran Kumar, who is the Global Marketing Director at Nanotech Energy. Before we speak to Mauran, there has been a raft of positive news for the UK recently, and I'm joined by my co-host Stuart. Stuart, a very warm welcome. We've got lots of good news, haven't we, for our wonderful sector?
Absolutely. Great start to February, and looking forward to the interview. Fantastic guest this week as well. So, I'll just run through some of the stories from the last few days. New figures from trade body ADS. They've revealed that the 13,525 strong backlog of aircraft orders is worth an estimated £190 billion to the UK's aerospace sector. Continuing the aerospace theme, Airbus, they've announced plans to recruit more than 13,000 people across the world. And as we revealed last year, the firm is set to recruit more than 500 people at Broughton as part of a £100 million investment programme. Wren Kitchens, they're set to create up to 1,000 jobs at a new manufacturing plant near Scunthorpe after acquiring a 15-acre site from North Lincolnshire Council. And we've got four positive stories for the automotive sector to finish with this week. Rolls-Royce Motor Cars, they're celebrating 20 years of production at its Goodwood manufacturing plant in West Sussex. UK commercial vehicle production soared 39.3% last year, well over 100,000 vans, trucks, taxis, buses and coaches leaving British factories, and that's the best annual performance for a decade. Jaguar Land Rover, they posted its first quarterly profit for 2 years, and that's following a ramp up in production of the Solihull built Range Rover and Range Rover Sport. And finally, LEDC, they're set to invest millions of pounds expanding the production capacity and range of models built at its Coventry manufacturing plant. Parent company Geely, which has invested £500 million at the West Midlands site over the last decade, they're planning to transform the iconic black cab maker into a high-volume, all-electric brand, producing a range of commercial and passenger vehicles.
Yeah, what a good start to the year, isn't it? It's fantastic. We're talking automotive. We're going to talk about automotive in a second with our guest as well. And why not? Let's introduce him. Big warm welcome to Mauran. You are the Global Marketing Director, at Nanotech Energy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me here.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for joining us. Just to jump straight in, Nanotech Energy. It may be a new name to many people in the UK, so perhaps you can start by giving us an overview of the company.
Yeah, sure. So Nanotech Energy, we are a US company. We've just set up shop in the UK as well, so we now have an entity and an office here, and rapidly growing here in the UK. Our our company has been underpinned by strong research and development in the graphene space. We actually own the very first graphene patent within the company that's resided with us for decades. Now, our focus has been with an array of products, I guess, over the years. The flagship product is what everyone's talking about in the markets, and that's our non-flammable graphene-powered battery. And flammability in usually when you look at your mobile phone and your laptop, it doesn't strike you as something that catches fire regularly. But I can assure you, as the electrification process ramps up, batteries are extremely flammable, and it's in a risk, and we deal with that risk using our safe chemistry.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Thank you very much. And can we learn a little bit about you? What's your background, your current role, and your responsibilities?
Yeah, sure. So I'm global marketing director for the group. So I am responsible for coming up with strategy. For example, opening up certain go-to-market strategies, developing sales strategies. My role is quite wide as well, because obviously I'm here in the UK, so I head up the UK as well. So but that will cover an array of responsibilities outside the kind of marketing space as well. Very focused on deal conversations as well, being able to mature deal conversations and close. That's been the focus, I think, for especially the last year at Nanotech.
Yeah, and obviously you started here in the UK, and there's rumours about potentially a gigafactory here in the UK. What can you tell us about that, and and what would that contribute to the local economy? And I'm interested also, secondly, to learn more about graphene, but perhaps we can concentrate on the factory first.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's not a secret anymore. We are, actively, looking to set up shop here. We've been spending quite a bit of time assessing an array of things, from sites to all the things that happen around evaluating a successful site, which includes obviously power and um, the right types of locations for ports, etc. So we've been doing a lot of that kind of nitty gritty uh, kind of due diligence, so we say, feasibility items over the last 6 to 9 months. In doing that, alongside that, we've also been watching what's been going on in the markets, learning from that as well. And also, in doing this kind of feasibility study, should we say, we've also been looking to structure potential partnerships with customers here, which kind of goes hand in hand with the planning of the gigafactory as well, to be frank. So, in terms of gigafactories are huge projects, right? I think the headline on us was 1 billion in terms of investment, but these can be phased out across different phases, and this can stretch into multiple billions, right, depending on how big you go. So as you can expect, the creation of huge amount of jobs. I can tell you that our Nevada gigafactory scope is going to create around approximately 1,000 jobs, and we're not very far off here in the UK either on our projections. So a lot of jobs created in the area. And naturally, there's obviously a real kind of invigoration of energy into the community as well, right? So you'll see the job creation kind of ripple through that community and various other investments that happen around the gigafactory as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And tell us more about this graphene. Lots of people have heard about it, but this is I guess your your secret dust, I suppose, isn't it? What's in this technology? It stops it becoming flammable.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I can't exactly go into much detail simply because of it's highly proprietary. But what I will tell you is I'll run through two things, right? First of all, what are the features of our graphene powered battery? So number one is, I mentioned, it's safe. So it just does not catch fire. There is a UCAR safety rating scale, which we would hit on the 1 scale, which means that we're very safe. We've got also the other benefit of our graphene technology in the battery is that it works under extreme weather conditions. So batteries normally, they don't really perform too well in extreme conditions, right? Whether it's high or low. Now our battery can perform in -40 and also +60 within that range, and that's for real world applications. So you think about marine in the kind of Arctic conditions, or even in Africa in hot kind of conditions, it performs quite well. The other thing is that we are able to achieve much stronger cycle life. And so we're getting over 2,000 cycles for 80% cutoff. When you compare that to what's out there in the market versus a Panasonic or LG equivalent, we're seeing 3 to 4 times better cycle life. And then finally, I'll finish with one thing, which is obviously energy density. That we're seeing very high energy density from our batteries, which is proving to be attractive to many people on the market. In terms of our, I can tell you obviously we're using the graphene electrolyte. That's where it's being used. But at the moment, we do believe that we're the only non-flammable battery maker, so we don't go into the technology so much.
Morning, Mauran. It's Stuart. Fascinating to learn more about Nanotech, you, and obviously graphene. In your, from your perspective, what makes the UK such a compelling location for your second manufacturing plant?
Yeah, good question, right? So for me, the UK is still, the fifth biggest economy in the world, right? It's demand here is alone is it should be strong enough for you to be able to sell batteries, and that's across different domains, right? People always think automotive, and automotive is a huge focus, but there are, in theory, some cell formats can be used in a different array of uses. So energy storage, for example, is scheduled to now, go through the roof, right, in the UK. So the UK, there are lots of positives, that when we've done our study, we can see. Being a US company, there's no withholding tax, which is great. So from a financial landscape perspective, it works quite well. And then in terms of jobs, being access to good quality talent as well, the UK does quite well. There's obviously universities quite close by some of the sites that we're looking at. And then secondly, there are, in terms of funding, there are some compelling cases that there is support. This is another real big topic of contention here, right? Because we saw obviously with British Volt there was 100 million offered, but that in the grand scheme of things is it's not a huge amount versus the total cost. But what I do see from the government now is quite a lot of support outside of just that money in terms of assisting with other things as well.
No, really good to hear. And in terms of proposed timeline, it might be difficult to be too definitive at this stage, but in terms of proposed construction, operation of the gigafactory, and I think you mentioned before that Nevada could sustain or create around about 1,000 jobs. Will the UK entity be, a similar enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, I'd expect, these gigafactories. Just taking your first question, right? These gigafactories take a long time to build, and they're usually done in phases as well. So we won't go big bang approach to 30 gigawatts. We are aiming for 10 gigawatts overall, but they will be done in phases. So we're still a few years away from that, just to be really firm. And there's obviously a significant amount of planning that needs to go into that for that to occur.
No, fair enough. And I think, like you said right at the beginning, just being honest and frank with people is going to be much appreciated. And going back to British Volt, they have cited. I know there's a lot of different factors at play, but they have cited a lack of cooperation from the UK government as a factor in its demise. You mentioned before that the government support is important, but how integral is it to the project? Is it very much without that support, it doesn't happen? Or are you confident with the backers that you have independently of government support?
Look, I think my role at Nanotech has been very much when it comes to looking at the European gigafactory. I've been engaging with a lot of countries and a lot of officials from countries, and I can tell you that the current landscape is pretty competitive. So the moment people caught wind that we're obviously looking to set up here, we've got a lot of aggressive offers from Europe, um, which I have raised to the government in the UK, right? Because there is definitely a lot of support in the UK. Let me start with that. So I think there is obviously the ATF fund, and you've got lots of R&D opportunities to start to scale up your product as well here in the UK. So I think the landscape does it is attractive for individuals, for companies to come here and apply and get funding. Now, in the case of British Volt, I can't really, comment too much. Obviously, there's a lot of talk around milestones and whatnot, and I think, I guess, that's specific to that company. Um, I think that the only criticism I could have of, I guess, the UK when it comes to funding is that it's not very clear. So in some countries, you will, some very, competitor type landscapes in the EU, they will say, Moran will give you 35%. This is what you're going to get. And it's quite black and white what you're going to receive. Now, I can tell you right now, whilst I might have a rough idea, it's not very clear if you're just entering the process in the UK, how much funding you'd get for your project. So I have fed that back, to very senior people on that. How important is funding? Look, I think these projects are very capital intensive. They are not cheap. They're costing billions of pounds, and there's batteries as well. Let me just touch a little bit back on my background. I used to be in investment banking, and in a sector that people deemed as quite challenging and tough. Batteries is definitely tougher, right? It's hard to make a battery, and make sure you can scale up, etc. Now, luckily, we've done that, and so we've proven concepts in the US before coming here, which de-risks it. But it's a very um, challenging topic. And machinery as well. Machinery is a huge cost relative to the actual build out. So yes, government funding is absolutely needed, not just on a upfront, for the actual gigafactory, but even for funding for potentially scale up activities alongside you building up the gigafactory as well. It's really important.
No, perfectly understood, and thanks for explaining that. And yeah, with regards to machinery, I'm sure Joe can offer you some mates rates. There's nobody better connected in the UK than Joe with machinery suppliers. Last question from me. This is one from one of our listeners talking about sustainability, energy consumption, etc. How will the proposed gigafactory address any concerns about carbon footprint and its environmental impact?
Yeah, so very good question, right? So we've got look, I'm not an expert on this, and I think in admitting that, it's very very important for me to be as low as possible on carbon footprint. So as a result, we've hired some of the best consultancies in the world to come up with innovative ideas in which we can reduce that as much as possible. There's some excellent ideas. I'd love to share with you some of the designs because I think it will catch people's eyes as well in the way we're going to use renewable sources on site as well. Um, and that's something that we're very proud of, and also will, rather than following the lead on people, we look to set an example to show people that um, we're investing money not just on building the gigafactory, but making it as low carbon as possible.
Yeah, that's interesting. What kind of partnerships and collaborations do you think you'll have at the plant at the gigafactory? Once it's established here in the UK?
Sure. So look, I think at this stage I can't um, reveal too many names because they're still I still haven't got clearance to release those. But we've got, in Britain itself, we're in dialogue with several household car makers, and have been for a while. There, as you can imagine, we've got a product that is very safe. So that safety factor is appealing to some sectors, especially. I can touch on that, elaborate a little bit more for you. So, for example, the UK MOD is very, very interested in having a safe battery. You can imagine if you've got energy storage system on your in your submarine or aircraft or vessel, then you'd prefer it to be non-flammable, right? So there's a lot of interest from defense, especially. We're also seeing, a huge energy storage momentum now growing, right? So um, again, whether it's home storage, if you're going to have loads of battery storage in your house, um, I'm sure if you Google, battery fires on your Google, you'll see there's a lot of battery fires happening now, whether it's in New York or other parts of the world. Now, again, if I've got kids, my family in my house, then I can tell you that I'd prefer to have something that's safe, and that's also the proposition that we're doing in that market. Likewise, on the industrial grid storage front as well, people are approaching us on that front. We're trying to keep nimble because we think that in delivering a battery that's well balanced in certain formats, then they can serve a few markets. And in doing that, you're really de-risking the business model because you've got a number of avenues. I will also stress as well that we have one big sales contract that has been delivered, signed in the EU, and that's for approximately 630 million US dollars. It's now about, and that's in the storage space, and it's now about kind of building on that, so that a UK gigafactory is well supported, with underpinned by sales contracts. So that I don't want to be critical of British Volt because I think they've done a fantastic job with a lot of things. But I think one of the key things that I want to do, and you can quote my words, is I want to sell out the gigafactory before it's built. To be frank, right? That's what I'm looking to do, and that's, I do believe that before it's built, it will be completely sold out.
Well, that is a there we are. That's the title for the thumbnail. But do you know what? I've got that's my next question. It's probably a lot easier. Sorry, a lot harder to execute than people may expect. But it's obviously you mentioned British Volt. Maybe obviously they spent hundreds of million on R&D and things. It sounds you're a lot closer to having a product. In fact, you've got the technology. You've just got to remodel it somewhat to fit in a motor vehicle. I know there's probably a little bit more to it than that, but essentially you already have the technology. Of course, there's R&D ongoing, but you've got the technology ready to go almost.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm sitting here in my office, and I've got batteries in front of me, right? So they can be delivered to a customer as samples, and that's no issue to us. So we're, in terms of producing batteries, we're doing that. It's not a huge quantity right now, So we'll obviously scale up to gigafactory speed kind of shortly over in the US, but the fact is the technology is mature and we can give customer samples. And this has probably been the bit that was, obviously where BV did have a few struggles. Um, but let me be very, very honest, right? It's taken us a long time as well to get there, but we're there.
Fantastic. And just a final one for me. Obviously, where you're not able to tell us where this gigaplant is going to be built, I'm presuming. But what type of community engagement and outreach, does the gigafactory plan to have here in the UK? Obviously, supply chains and things like that. But how about the community engagement piece?
Yeah, look, there's that's something that kind of is being discussed, and we've had a lot of brainstorming at a high level. As we then select the site, we will be having detailed plans. So I've kind of brought in an array of advisors, consultancies to assist with that. But as we narrow things down, which is happening right now, we will invest a lot of time making sure that the community outreach is strong. It's but it's also a two-way dialogue as well. So we'll be, one of the things that is very important to me, and this is because I'm born and brought up in the UK as well, is that that we have good dialogue with both people in the area, officials, etc. Because this project, it's not just for us; it's for the UK as well. The demand for battery production is, it's very high, and we can assist with that. But at the same time, the UK needs it. We need to be able to assist as well.
Yeah, I couldn't put it better myself. Mauran, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been an education. When you make the announcement, perhaps you can come back on.
Absolutely, sounds good.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us, Stuart. Thank you for joining me. More positive news coming on our next episode of the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. But for now, it's goodbye from us.
Thanks for listening to the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and a review. You can find us on Twitter using @MTDMFG and @Jefferson_MFG.